Good afternoon. We are going to call the special meeting of the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority to order at 2:01 p.m. Do you have the agenda? Yes, sir. You. Okay, roll call. We have Commissioner Anderson from Washington that is present, and Commissioner Tiefler. Oregon, we have Commissioner Fox, Commissioner Paulson, and Commissioner Alternate Tom. So we do have a forum. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
I don't think you can on a special meeting.
No, that you are correct. You cannot modify what was put. But I would, for the record, show that at the bottom, it does say that we can have an executive session.
Not a modification, but change in order. I might suggest we do B first, just because it probably is a quicker thing.
Okay.
Yep.
We can do that.
Out of the way, and at least then if we run out of time or something, that's done.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, we will open it up to public comment. I am not seeing anyone online or in the room. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I'm going to close public comment. We will move into action items. Number one is the CDM Smith Amendment 1 credit rating process.
So
Thank you.
Sorry, we are working on a contract for CDM Smith to do the investment grade traffic and revenue. That should be coming back to the board in May for a decision for a full contract for them. We need some additional access to CDM Smith as we're working through some of the full policies, and it's not like a limited notice to proceed, but it's really an amendment to their existing contract. But it's acting like a stopgap until we get their contract done in May. So it's just to give them a lump sum, not to exceed amount of 12,000 to allow staff to pull them in when needed until we get the full contract done. So that's the purpose of why we're asking for this. Because we're having a special meeting, we just go ahead and ask now instead of wait until May.
So the current contract is for all the work that they're doing.
It was for them to do work in support of the TIFIA and finance credit ratings.
And they were preparing some presentations. They were
helping to prepare some presentations.
So these presentations are additional?
These are additional work to what they were doing previously. And it's to help feed some of the discussion on policy and helping to have that discussion with the finance group and finance team as they develop the scope and documents for the full policy. So ultimately it'll be brought to the board to review.
Okay. So was it 2 board meetings ago, we took action to authorize HNTB staff time to work with the finance committee on tolling policy.
Correct.
And now we're saying an outside support is needed to do that same toll policy work?
No, they have a specific element of it in the investment grade work that will be done, and they need to provide input to that toll policy. So they will just provide input related to the investment grade and portions of that policy so that they understand how they're going to do their traffic and revenue investment grade study. Those two things kind of link together. And the assumptions that go into the investment grade study need to match what's in the policy. So it's linking those two things and making sure that people that are going to run traffic and revenue investment grade have input into how the policy is developed and that they're speaking the same language.
So when we had the discussion about staff supporting the committee for tolling policy, it was about the infrastructure and some of those early decisions that were needed.
Yeah.
Generally about what we wanted to undertake with tolling, but this sounds like support that's now going to get into needing to make some decisions or give direction on all the different types of tolls or where we want to see rates or increases. Because how, are we shifting the scope here of what the committee's doing? Because I thought their work with the staff on tolling policy was not getting into any discussion higher level about true policy when it comes to the cost of tolling. It was about making sure we're accounting in the design for the infrastructure that's needed for the way we want to toll. And
it's also starting to develop the baseline framework of the policy that you have to adopt as well. So there's that piece of it as well as the infrastructure piece that needs to happen. But yes, we do need to start developing the actual policy and start making some decisions related to policy that will evolve over time. Some of those will not be able to be made until after we get the investment grade study done. But there's other ones that we need to start getting discussions on and working through now.
So did we know this? How come this just didn't come
We thought we
for us alongside staff? Because that paints the full picture of what we're actually having on a committee.
Because we thought we were gonna have their contract done, we did not have the contract done, and rather than waiting until May. The thought was bring it now. We can wait till May if you wanna wait till May. It just delays getting input from them. We can do it either way. It's not really additional work, it's just advancing ability.
May is next week.
May 13th is the next meeting, so it's 2 weeks. So, I mean, we can postpone it, it's not a problem too, I mean, it was just time saving time.
We were looking
You want to do it?
Do what?
Advance this?
The budget amount is 12,000, right? I would personally, I would not expect it to take that much time or money to do. Just because a lot of it is very straightforward math. It's stuff that just goes into calculating credit ratings and for indicative ratings and that sort of thing. And we just need to make sure that we are truing up those assumptions with policy. That's in a nutshell all it is.
I'm not so much worried about the 12,000, because all that is just a number that you don't want to exceed until you can get the next contract in place.
Yep.
But if, to me,
I
As the
don't want to
chair
use, I don't
of
want to
the-
use any more than we need.
yeah. As the chair, if you feel that this backup is needed to execute the work, then I'm all for it.
It is something we would have to do anyway in order to make sure that whatever policies we're putting together for tolling matches up our indicative ratings, our credit ratings, everything else we need for the institutional ratings, not only for TIFIA, but anything else we may need to use those indicative ratings for.
And that can very easily become a critical path on the
Yeah.
job. So anything we can do to push it forward a little bit, I think it's worthy of considering.
So you're going to have within this time frame, 4-hour rating agency presentation, correct? I mean, I'm looking at what they're supposed to do with it, so.
I think the way she put this together, and Debbie's not on, I apologize, is that the additional work is number 4.
Just number 4.
Yeah.
Well,
Because they did the TNR study, they did the rating presentation. I think what we're adding is the additional item number 4.
well,
So she's saying 43 hours.
yeah, there's a big difference between the 6-hour advisory assistance and what they're saying, that there's 18 hours of project manager, 10 hours of transportation planner. And then another project manager for total.
When is the next finance committee meeting?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, because between now and then, if we have a presentation we're giving, then absolutely we need to do it.
To include it.
But if we don't have a presentation,
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of like,
So it's the 3 things on the last page. It's the scope of services, the original contract includes additional virtual preparation for up to 3 hours in prep time, 1 additional rating agency presentation that will be virtual, and 6 hours of advisory assistance and development of policy. So that's the additional work.
That's the ceiling, by the way.
12,000 is a not to exceed.
Yeah.
right?
So the total contract
I
amount,
don't feel like the chart's matching. The chart's saying estimated amendment 1 cost. And it's capturing hours and time. We're reviewing this presentation from them in this letter as amendment 1. So how can we then in the closure do a different breakdown for that scope? Yeah,
I don't understand what you're saying. It's the additional 3 hours of prep time.
well, that's what she's saying. This is what this is saying, but this is saying this is the amendment 1 cost. So is this not amendment 1 cost? This is total.
Table 1 is the amended.
That is.
Yeah, so then those bullets
So where the 18 hours for the project manager coming from and the other 10 hours the senior specialist coming from if all they have is 6 hours advisory assistance? 3 preps.
And I guess is that in case we needed additional, it wasn't just exactly what we needed.
But then it would need to be in the scope.
Yes.
I guess my inclination is, what would be nice to be seeing is this along with what we had already previously agreed to and locked into. And then I would say, if there's not a pressing thing that's happening in the next 2 weeks, I thought what we approved 2 meetings ago is to get the head start with staff. It seems like that work can still be going on. Is this really, if it comes to the full board on the 13th with the additional all information at the same time, is that holding up the committee?
Probably not detrimental, it just
Right.
is getting them on board and trying to keep things moving, so. We don't wanna do it, we can wait until the 13th.
Yeah, it's not necessarily holding things up. But we wouldn't want to push this decision too much beyond.
But again, though, there's an additional rating agency presentation that will be virtual. Do we need, and we have that plan and it's on the books? Yes or no?
Yes.
And when is that plan?
We've got to look it up. The rating agencies have been asking for a lot of additional information. They've switched staff on us. They're asking for a lot more details than we anticipated. And there's a fair amount more effort in that. They're asking about Kiewit and who they are.
So May 16th is the next funding finance meeting.
But that's not the rating agency.
No, but they were asking.
There was a meeting today, but I wasn't able to get that they had.
I have a question and maybe something. On the first page, it says the total estimated cost is 12,000, so not to exceed 24,000. Then we're asking for an additional 12,000, so it'd be not to exceed 36,000.
But the original contract was 12, we're asking for an additional 12, that's like 24.
Okay, so $24,000 should cover all of these items here, as well as,
The first 4 plus the next 3.
got it.
Better.
Well, pretty much they're just doubled it.
Yeah,
There's gonna be another 4-hour rating agency presentation.
I guess my thought was, are we having this meeting because there's an urgency to this, or was this added on because it was convenient, because we knew this meeting was coming? And I guess where I go is, you have special meetings because there's something that's like very pressing, and it seemed like the amendment is why we're coming together, and should that other item, it seems, absent this meeting, already been slated for May 13th. And should it not just stay
It was-
there?
Yeah, it was added because of the opportunity to add it to this meeting. We would not have called a special meeting just for that.
For that.
Correct. Yes. It was because we were having this, as Debbie said, well, if you're gonna have a special meeting, can you add this to the agenda?
it's an opportunity to get it, just make a decision on it if we choose to. Because it will be a critical path regarding tipping and whatnot pretty soon anyway. So it's just getting ahead of that timeframe a little bit by like 2 weeks, assuming that we're going to also agree to it on the 13th.
And is their presentation the same from the first virtual meeting, or
It
they?
is on the first one. I don't know the details of what's in the first. I haven't seen it, you know. Everything that's been going on with that. I know I've seen the emails, they've been asking a ton of questions. They've been having to go back, they changed the staff out, the guys who met us. They switched to a different group. And have been having to go back and answer more questions with Cole than what anybody anticipated.
So Kroll straight.
Kroll's
Their
switching their staff and has been asking a lot more questions and they've had to been responding to that. Which has created more effort.
Why is the decision that Kroll made for them to internally switch their staff going back on us as much as it seems to be? So it would be nice if Kroll were to pick this up instead of us. Because they're the ones that changed staff. But, okay,
So all those people that came all the way up here that we paid for got pulled off the project.
I don't think they're completely pulled off, but they have deferred it over to others to work on it. I don't know, like I said, I haven't been in the weeds of why. I just have seen the emails where they've been changing staff office.
Can we have our legal team look at our contract there? Like, we're kind of with grants and it seems that, I mean, it does seem then potentially through our contract, there's a means to like come to them either to like raise concerns about how they're handling our project or push for some change in like monetary commitment. 'Cause that is,
How much is our contract with Kroll due on credit review? Pretty significant.
it's quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, 200
Yeah.
thousand. 25.
yeah, anytime, I generally think credit ratings are always overcharged anyway, but
Right.
yes, it's not zero.
Well, I guess to help move things along, we're in discussion. I would say as part of the discussion, like I lean towards, I guess, keeping this on the May 13th meeting, but I'm not opposed to other people bringing action forward. But it seems like in the interest of getting.
Will there be, is there any additional information that the body needs for May 13th that would change your idea or minds on moving forward with this? It sounds like Kroll is requesting another virtual meeting and CDM Smith is the only people who can do it. So we have to do it. We're not going to just walk away from it. So at what point is there any value in pushing it to the 13th versus letting them get started?
I mean, I guess I would just say like more where I go with my head, and I think it's come up before, we've raised it about process. Like the proper way for this to have come before the board would have been with the full background and context. So this is an amendment. The existing contract should be included as material we're reviewing. That is, I'm not saying I'm a no on the 13th, but I'm holding now to like, we're getting a little bit like rushed on things that don't need to be rushed, overall building like a picture that seems sloppy. And it does seem, and I would support, whether that's from our chairs or our owner's rep, it seems like there's some actions Kroll has taken that we should like reference our contract and maybe push back gently on. Because how many, like, if this is happening one time, do they just have our hands behind our back? Like, if they have made their own administrative decisions that are now costing us money or a bait and switch, or we thought we had a team and we invested in that, we've lost them, why are we gonna carry all that? So those are like the questions in my head, and while I'm just saying.
Well, and I guess that's my fault. I didn't anticipate needing to answer all those questions for this. So if I had, I would have brought in the PMP team and
Yeah.
Carrie and Debbie and had everybody here and we could have answered all those questions. But I wasn't anticipating getting that many on a $12,000 increase. So in the future, we will bring everybody in and make sure we have all the details.
And which then goes to the question, if we're bringing everybody in, we just need it from 12,000 to 15, 16,000.
Yeah.
Just to have the conversation.
Just have a conversation about it.
Well, no, again, like, I just think it's we have. I really don't want to slow us down, but like, this is a special meeting. My understanding, and I was not at the Monday meeting, was that this special meeting was the result of needing to discuss the amendment. I think we should have stayed that course. This feels rushed. The appropriate thing, and if that direction needs to be coming from chairs, but anything we've expressed on other issues, you bring the full context needed to like make a decision, whether it's $12, 12,000 or 12 million. And this shouldn't even be something in my mind that we're spending this time on, where we need to convene about the amendment. This would have always been going before the full board on the 13th. Carrie and Debbie are at those meetings. So now it's a cost neutral. Like, that would have been, that's our rhythm, that's our process. Like, let's be disciplined about our processes we have.
Did I hear a motion to table this project?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second to table it, and don't you ever say about doing something. No, it will just take a short amount of time.
I won't do that.
Any further discussion?
Everything is buttoned up before we bring anything back.
No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay. Now we will move on to amendment number 6, the negotiations with the owner's rep contract.
So, our contract ends at the end of January, or the amendment, our amendment ends at the end of June. We are bringing amendment 6, which is our, scope of work for phase 1A, which is for the owner's rep contract to continue with the support we have been doing in general, as well as the oversight of the PDB that's now on board, and their deliverable of their phase 1 activities. So what we've brought is our scope, our level of effort, and also some contract amendments that we feel need to be revised. Just to clean up some things from the port contract to the bridge authority contract. And also to align them with how we contracted with Kiewit related to travel reimbursements, escalation clauses, things that we're gonna have to deal with now, but also in the future, with those contracts, so. And let's say I'll answer any questions and.
Hey, Mike, I want to add one more thing that this amendment also includes all the work we have to do to develop the amendment for subsequent phases, like a phase 2. The contract has to be developed to capture everything that we're gonna discuss and negotiate and finalize in the form of a contract for phase 2, which is much bigger than phase 1.
It's our development of that, as well as development of our supporting contracts that we have to do.
And also the raise grants of the administration.
Grant administration. Let's say it's general activities as well as, and what you'll see in the PDF that had all of the wonderful numbers per month. Is that the summary of that, we went out to the outside of that sheet and identified the items that we felt were percentage of it was PDB oversight versus things that were non-PDB oversight. And we put in what we thought they were. And what the reason for doing that is to better align our level of effort to oversight what Kiewit is doing and the things that we are doing that Kiewit doesn't have any involvement in. So there's a number of activities that we are doing that they don't have involvement in. Right away, grant administration, the funding and finance piece, percentages of our management time, are all things that really have nothing to do with the PDB contract. So you'll see that the numbers were, I think, 2.5 million in PDB oversight and about 2 million in non-PDB activities, which add up to the 4.9.
Can you remind me, how much did we authorize Kiewit?
7.12 for phase 1A. So it's about 25% of their contract. And then also on here is a summary of the raise grant, which is a subcontract to this contract, which is delivering the scope of work for the raise grant. That scope of work is in here as task 17. And that will be it's planned to be ran independently of the main contract so that it doesn't take away from it. There are some overlap in it because it is going to establish the typical section. There is some intersection on the Washington side that will overlap with it. And there's also some time that will be in there in phase 1B. Part of the raise grant will support part of Kiewit's development of like ped facilities on the actual bridge. There's also some element in this, it's not in here in the numbers, but we're also using some of the raise grant money to reimburse the local agencies that we work with. We will have developed contracts for that. and agreements between the authority and whatever agencies that we're gonna work with in order to reimburse them. But there is funding that we've kind of identified to say we should reimburse some of the local agencies. Development of that action. And then depending on what we end up doing with the potential raise grant implementation grants. If the project has enough funding and we don't think we need to apply on the project's behalf for a raise implementation grant. Then we are doing this work to basically set up the local agencies to be able to go pursue those implementation. grants. So once we kind of know our funding picture selfishly, I'm gonna say once we know our funding picture and determine whether the authority wants to pursue implementation grants for the bridge project. If they don't, then we can make the decision to turn it over to these and let them take the action plans and move forward with it. The scope that's in here right now is just delivering the first phase, and we've again tied it to our contract time period. So there's a phase 1A of the raise grants that just aligns with timing of, rather than having two separate things and two separate deadlines, we just align them. And also to keep them on contract or on schedule in order to deliver some of the deliverables they need to inform the phase of the project. And that was about, it was 101.5 million for this phase of the.
So that 1.5 is the HNTB administration plus local agency
That was
reimbursement?
just HNTB's estimates and subs, and yeah, expenses related to that, so it's not, the local agencies would have to be under an agreement with the bridge authority.
And so the estimate that's going to Kiewit towards the actual designing of the bike ped is
That would be in phase one.
roughly 2 million?
No, so there's still.
There's
this doesn't
3.6 of the
complete-
raise, right?
3.6 of the raise, this is 1.5
Mhm.
to go through the phase 1A scope that we've identified. Then there'll be a phase 1B that will finish up the rest of the 3.6. That's made up of the local agency participation, could be some local agency participation as part of phase 1A. And then the Kiewit participation will be separately and it should be funded through the Kiewit contract.
What is Kiewit proposed to do on this?
When they do their bike ped work on the bridge,
Yeah,
in order to have, some of this money can be used for reimbursement through the grant to pay for their development on the bridge.
but we're
It's
only
another
talking,
funding source for the bridge authority to fund the project.
okay, but we're not gonna have Kiewit do anything off the bridge.
No, absolutely not.
I think we gotta be real careful here.
They have separate charge lines and have been identified exactly that they are only allowed to work.
Well, their scope of work is only the bridge.
Yeah, well, it's,
We awarded a contract for only the bridge.
but remember, it's, when I say the bridge, I just want to be clear, the, on the bridge means tying in as well. So like on the Hood River side, you still have the attachments come in, but it is the attachments to the bridge and the bridge
Yeah.
only. That's.
I'm fine with that, but if we start talking about going into Hood River and going up to White Salmon, then I think we got a problem.
Kiewit's not touching any of that, and there's very few staff on the owner's rep side that are touching any of that work as well. We've kept it as separated as we can.
And when is work gonna start? So all the raise work is anticipated
It can't
again?
start until we get the agreement done. So we've sent that to the feds and they've sent it to their legal in DC. So I would anticipate we will get started May 1st. That's our goal, is to hopefully get started May 1st. We've gotten through all the questions and edits and all that with them. And it looks like we could probably get it back on May 1st.
I don't know if I want to bring this up, but you're here. When this grant was given to us, HNTB basically got a sole source award for performing the grant. Are we still street legal with that?
Well, I want to, I think we are, but Tahi, what's your thoughts on that?
I think as we were comparatively evaluated when we initially selected and the scope of work included grants, that should be fine.
It also included planning and preliminary engineering, which is what this is.
I don't think your original contract had that.
It had planning in it. It was for planning, design, and construction oversight.
Of the bridge.
Yes.
I think and I'm fine as long as the legal folks think we're okay, but we're stretching it. Because I was the one who wrote the scope.
We can have legal take a look at it.
I just want to make sure it didn't come back on us later.
No, I agree. I mean, we felt like we were. I mean, we can double check it.
Yeah, it's always been a nagging thought in my back of my mind. I just don't want us to get in trouble.
Can you follow up with Mark?
Yeah, I will, yeah,
Double check that they feel like it's all within the scope of our original contract.
yeah, I didn't have a full knowledge of how the initial contract was written. And then I'll double check and then check with Mark
Okay.
and seek his opinion.
Yeah, but if you see any gray area whatsoever, Brink, let's talk about it, because I don't want to even be remotely close to not being.
And
Yeah.
while he's checking that, are we sure we're okay as a bridge authority to be doing this?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that you guys can do this.
Yeah, I don't have
As
I mean, again, some of this, I'm like, we
applied for the
went
grant.
forward, we applied for it, and it was awarded to us.
But I don't know that there's anything that keeps you guys from doing it. Because the action plan that you're doing, yes, it goes out. We have to stay within what they call the APE, the area of potential
Yeah.
effect that we talked about for the NEPA documents. As long as we're within that area, we're within the project limits. And this is a part of the project in order to get implementation grants to build bike components of the bridge.
Okay.
We have to do this piece. Now, can we get into the middle of White Salmon and doing sidewalks? And no, absolutely not.
Just kidding.
Right? I mean, yeah, Kevin
Well,
asked if we
I
could go
almost
over-
think once we get to the parameter of our bridge, anything beyond that, we cannot touch.
You cannot
authority-wise.
physically go build anything. You should not go physically build anything. I think you are fine to develop the plan and the action plan that extends to a greater action
It
plan
can be handed off.
that can be handed off.
Okay.
Construction wise, I agree. You absolutely cannot go outside the immediate impact of the bridge.
Yeah, that planning bit is where we should be partnering with White Salmon or
That was,
stretch that out.
that
Well, I
was
think
part of the
longer
reason.
term too, we got to figure out phase two. Who's going to sponsor and own this? Is it
Well, I
White
think,
Salmon?
and that's why I said,
Hood River?
That's why I think it's a planning grant that then is.
I think it depends on our funding situation when we apply for the implementation grant. If we have all the money we need and we don't need any more, then I would say we turn it over to the locals and say, hey, we did the initial part, we didn't need it.
Yeah.
If we knew we had all the funding we needed right now, I'd say don't do any of this and let the locals do it. But we don't know, so I think in preparation of making sure
But
we have
again,
access.
we can't be applying for phase two after this because it's outside our APE. for the bridge.
I mean, to me, I think it's a,
The implementation plan, the implementation grants for raise could pay for the bridge component, the bike ped components on the bridge. Okay, we could ask for another 35 or $50 million to pay for the bike ped piece of the bridge.
And I think that's the strategy that the next grant is actually two grants. Grant on the bridge and then somebody else, White Salmon, do the grant for the outside the bridge.
The local agencies can take that action plan and apply for implementation grants or other grants that require, there's another one, the State Streets for All.
I'm sorry I took this much,
Yeah,
but
no,
it's been a concern.
and they could, so part of the reason we did this was we needed to do it. And we said, well, let's not just do it for the bridge. Let's go ahead and do it so that everybody can use it.
Mm.
And that's why we went down this path and we needed potentially access to the 35 to 50 million that we could maybe get.
Yeah, after this, localities can tap into a number of grants that are available to build the network out, Safe Streets for All, Smart Streets 2.0.
I mean,
They should be able to take it from there.
we probably shouldn't have been the agency doing the action plan. But we were the only ones that were putting.
Had a desire to push it forward.
Or, yeah, I mean, the ability to write it all up and do it and put it in and. This is our community good deed. So, yes, so questions?
Any questions about it?
Right? You sent an email, at least to me, I don't know the rest of the.
Yeah,
I'm going back there.
I'd like to hear from others if anybody else had a
Did
had a
everybody
concern
get a
with it,
chance-
then
did everybody get a chance to review the email you sent?
no,
Did you print a copy?
I got copies here.
Can we hand out those copies? I think that'd be a good place for them.
Again, I didn't want to influence. If you guys are okay with it, just one voice.
Oh, coming in both ways.
Hi.
Just can get hold of them.
So the way this was organized, I spent probably 3 hours just going through the write-up and then to a lesser extent, the cost tables. And I wanted first to understand what are we buying? And then take a look at what's it costing us. So when I went through the scope document, I quickly came back to maybe we need to go back to some basics. What I think this is as it says under general, instead of me saying it, why don't you take a minute and read it paragraph? And I apologize for the typos. There's a couple in there. Okay.
I don't have access to can you have the scope and contract B language and the contract ready to pull up and show, please?
On the screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
I can do that.
situated where I can do it, so can you
Yeah, I
have
can
those
do
ready to
that.
pull up? Just if we got any specific questions that we can pull
Sure.
it up and go to it.
You're okay with that on the,
It's gonna be public information at the end.
well, I'm just
The
asking
only
because
thing
I don't
I
know.
don't want to put out would be people's individual salaries.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's
All public.
Make
all
sure,
public anyways.
no, yeah, I just wanted to
We used to work for the DOT, everything that we do is public.
be squeaky clean, you gotta be squeaky clean, so I'm just saying. I had my general comment, I think, and I spoke this morning with Commissioner Fox, was that it was there's a lot of broadness to the potential scope in and of itself, which allows for potential no change order, which is great, because that also, in my opinion, costs time and money, and this bridge cannot wait for time and money. And it was unclear to me what we were buying. So that is something that I did speak to. I did have a chance to ask some questions to Shannon earlier today, so I had a lot of my questions were answered. But it was mostly about what are specific, where's the money going and how is it getting there, and who's doing the work, and what does the work entail, and what's the check and balance to ensure the work's been done.
One of the things that I did, and I didn't really think about this one, but I did when it got brought up. We typically write these things for an owner that has a whole bunch of processes, right? Like a design manual and a process manual for everything under the sun. I think we forget that we don't have that. And I talked to our right-of-way group and actually talked to Reddy this morning and said, hey, we need to add detail in here because they don't have a manual that they can go look that says, here's what right-of-way does, right? And here's what a 15% review looks like. And here's all the things you check. And here's also, when I said that, they were like, oh yeah, you're probably right. And one of the things that we can do, or we will do going forward, is potentially pull some of those out and say, hey, here's the process we're going to follow, and put it in as an attachment so that we're not just rewriting something that we're going to do, but pull some of those processes out and add them as attachments so that there's clear, like, most DOTs, 15% that has a whole checklist of like, here's all the things that 15%. Right, and then you can go into the manual and it says, here's what 15% roadway alignment has. It has a PC and a PT and a PVT and blah, 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 right? So we go attach those things to it, and then you have a very clear picture of what does a roadway engineer do when they're reviewing a 15% roadway submittal. That detail is not in here. We just said, hey, we're going to review a submittal because we were our mindset was, well, there's manuals for that.
And I'll give you, this project is not the typical owner rep contract. And I look at you guys more like you're part of the owner.
Yes.
And you're spending the owner's money. And if this was a real business, which it's not, that every dollar we don't spend is a dollar in additional profit.
Yep. Well, good.
In this case, it's a dollar less than we have to toll.
Yep.
And the ripple effect. So that puts a mindset into managing the effort that we're careful with our dollars. Where I think in the typical owner's rep contract with the federal highway, first off, those guys aren't even looking at what you're doing and what it's costing because they've got very, very deep pockets. We don't. We have to look at this, I think, more like a hard money profit loss project. And the profit and loss is impacts to our tolling.
No, and myself and Tahee both spent a number of years on the owner's side, so we often have to remind ourselves that we're not the owner. And Sound Transit is not and was not, still is not an easy agency to do anything for because they are very expensive in what they do, and that's the world he came from. But we often, Tahee, have that conversation of, well, if you're the client, how would you approve this and what would you say? And we try to look at it with those lenses of, if I was sitting in the Florida Turnpike seat and somebody was bringing this to me and asking for something, what would I say to them?
The other way to kind of think about this is roughly $4.8 million. If we came back to you and say, hey, man, we just can't afford this, we got to cut 500,000 out of it or $1 million out of it. Where would you go first to start looking at impacts and what you could lob off?
Right. Yeah.
And then understand the impact.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question that I like to ask my people in my life who are good with finances. One is, as is now, can we afford it? And two, does this actually increase the total price of the bridge from 520 to 524? I mean, I'd like to know that because really, honestly, that's the question that I have to ask. Because this is not, I know we are representing federal money, taxpayer money. And I just want to know, one, and this is can we afford it? Like, you're the one with them, and two, does this increase the total number? Because if it increases total number, then we need to then make sure that we're communicating that. So it's not 520, it's 521 or 520.5. And so maybe that will help me understand better because I did go through and I did look at the Excels and I did compare all the numbers and I looked where we're spending the money and I love how we the percentages here, but I know NEPA is taking longer and it's costing way more money than we need and we have to pay for that. So there's some aspects of the contract that there's no way we could take money for. And I actually think more needs to be devoted to get it going quicker, but those are my two, over.
So for me, it was, we've got earn rates and dollars and cents. And is this what we were budgeting for between the 7 million and now 5 million? And how does that fall into our cash flow?
I would make one minor adjustment to that comparison. I would take out that raise grant stuff because that's never in the 520.
Right, I'm not adding that. I said the 5 million and the 7 million.
Okay,
Raise the
rounded to
7.
the 5. Got it.
Yes. And where does that put us cash flow and where does that put us for our getting there? I mean, are we biting off more than we were expecting to on our owner's rep contract at this time?
I can give you a question.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things on that. One, the PCE that was done in 2021 assumed a design build setup, right? So the way it was distributed out, if you just look at the $4 million that was allotted to the management of the contract. Okay? That needs to be reallocated into a PDB situation, right? Which we've done and we came up with that's the same one. So is this great? $4 million. It also depends, then you gotta step back and look at what was in that $4 million and what was not in that $4 million. Which is part of the reason in going through and looking at the percentages of what was or wasn't in that estimate. Grant administration, I don't think was ever taken into account. I think the support of the authority was not in PCE. I think the TNR to some level was, but I don't know if it was fully contemplated of what that was gonna take. Right away, I would say, I don't know whether they took into account the management of the right of way versus just the property purchases, right? And the appraisal costs and, maybe they did, I don't know. You may know that better than I do, so.
I think what you're saying in a nutshell is that when this estimate was done 2 years ago, we didn't know a lot, but we put pockets of allowances in there. As we continue to develop the project, we need to continuously go back and show impacts on the original 520. To me, I would have expected to see by now, we know NEPA is really late. There's an impact on that. If nothing more than we're spending more time chasing these guys.
Yeah.
But I think there's other ripple effects. So NEPA is one. A big one that's hanging out there right now is the foundation. That's gonna be I know is coming. The other thing is the level of support that we're seeing that we need to manage the progressive design build, I think is evolving, and there's some exposure there. So I think it's definitely we need a fresh OPC at the end of the year. But we ought to be looking at gross impacts right now, and we ought to be able to tell each other that, hey, we've got a problem in this area, in that area, and that area. And we don't really know whether it's 5 million or 7 million, but it's in this range that we're going to have to deal with. And right now we've got 30% contingency, and I think you guys have already shaved some of that off. So we need that picture till we really understand, okay, what do we got left and where's this thing
And
going?
this is gonna be a constant monitoring of this, right? That's why you put contingency in that. That's why you put us. We're going to see numbers that are over and under every number in that PCE, right? The monies we're talking about peanuts compared to what we're gonna be talking about when we get into construction, right? You're gonna be talking about $20 million, $10 million, $30 million changes. So I think, $500,000, is it gonna make or break the project? No. Do I think we need to pay attention to it? Absolutely. We need to watch every element that we're putting money against, right? And that PCE needs to be measured against that, but we've got to get everything aligned. So we're measuring apples and apples. So I would say right now, is it gonna change the 520? I don't know if we know the answer to that right now. Well, is it more than what we anticipated? Yes. Right? Depending on how you look at that 4 million and what was in it. Are we using a little bit of a contingency over that? Yes. Is that what contingency is for? Yes. But we can't just do it in a vacuum and think that the contingency is an endless bucket, right? There's a finite number of in there, and we need to pay attention to where we're using that. Are we getting value out of the additional money we're spending or no? And we gotta weigh those things, and some of it's gonna come down to, do we really need that or do we not? Right? And you're gonna give up some things and maybe it costs you, maybe it doesn't. You track them on the risk register and some of them will work out and some of them won't.
The other thing is that this phase 1A is where we're gonna find a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's either gonna be good or it's gonna be bad. And hopefully there's more good than bad. Like when you're looking at the bridge type and constructability of the bridge, I'm hoping in the 520, we did it on purpose. We selected from what we had at the time, the worst case scenario of constructability and cost. So hopefully we've got some slop built into that we'll see as we move through design.
I hope so, but I tell you, you're watching WashDOT, it's not the numbers they're saying, but who knows?
Greg, can you answer the question of if cash flow, like, what does this do to our cash flow?
I have to take a look at it I haven't integrated this amendment into it. Back of the envelope stuff, it gets tighter
Earlier.
in October, earlier, yep, and then we get, assuming that we receive the state funding and whatnot, come in a timely manner, then yeah, we still have the same problem next year where we need to bridge a gap. Tentatively back of the envelope, just looking at it off the top of my head, it's not the worst thing in the world. We should have, without giving you exact numbers, close to fine until phase 1B. Sometime in phase 1B
And 1B, we're projected to start,
next year, January 25.
We're so.
so we're in May.
Yes.
Okay, so like, let's not pretend, like,
May
it's
is now until the end of the year, yes.
correct. And so
Yes.
we have until the end, I mean, so we're potential, so what I'm hearing you say, just repeating it back.
Mhm.
It gets tight this October,
Depending on when.
so it's very soon, 'cause that's
Depending
my birthday month.
depending on when funds from Washington.
I hear you, yeah.
The reason is that the assumption we made on the Washington funding was the 10 million, and what was supposed to be federal at the time when we originally ran the cash flow was not gonna come in until November. Now that they've changed that and it's now actually state funds, that money should come in before. And that's what say about getting the funding grant agreement redone for the 5 million to get it to 15. That's what we are able to advance, is to get that money sooner. So as soon as the money comes in, the only reason October looks bad is because 10 million comes in November. If you move that to December, then November will look bad. It's timing of when that 10 million comes in, to how it covers us on the cash flow. So not that we should be checking our own work, but we kind of have to, because we're running the cash flow. So we went back and put all the numbers that we currently know back into the cash flow, put all the sources back in, put in the assumptions of when we're gonna get it, said, do we have enough money? Because we gotta bring that problem to you. So this makes a problem, and we all got a problem. So right now, we have a problem in May of next year. And we will have a decision to make between April and June of next year. If we don't get the BIP grant, we don't get state funding to the levels that we know, and if our OPC changes dramatically, we have some tough decisions to make about what we're gonna do. Because if we don't get BIP, we don't get the state funding, you can't go to construction.
So,
And you now have to figure out, do you just go bid build? Do you delay construction a year? So we're not out of the woods of like having a project in the back yet.
but that constraint though, because you're saying May, is now earlier.
No, they'll get paid it based on the amount of money. That cash, the amount of money we have in hand is still the amount of money we have in hand, right?
It changes a little bit based on the amendment, the amount.
The amendment, I'm just wondering how the amendment impacts our.
Between 4,000,008.
Yeah, you're still right. You're still short, but you're short. It doesn't change when you're short. Like this amendment, this amount doesn't change whether you are or are not short. It changes the amount you're short by. But it doesn't change whether it would be like August instead of May. You're still short in May, whether this is 4 million or you
100
make this
million.
1 million, it's still gonna be, you're still gonna be short in May. You can't move forward,
Okay,
no matter what we do.
so we can't pay our bills, but it's not because of the increase in this.
Yes.
Okay,
And you're gonna have to start in May, you will, well, before May, we'll have to start tipping into some of the local area loans if we can't get the infra grant money sooner.
we can't get infra grant if that's tied to specific things.
We just have to get the grant agreements in place, and we're trying to get those in time to be able to. So we've made some assumptions on the sources of when we think we'll get the money in. If we get them earlier, it helps things. If we don't get them when we say, then we've put them at kind of critical periods where it's like, we've got a problem.
Which is another reason why Debbie wanted to bring the credit rating issue to us earlier as opposed to 2 weeks from now, for example, just to get a head start on some of that stuff, to get ahead on some of the financing needs that we'll have.
Yeah,
But we are gonna be pinching pennies until June of next year, and we find out if we're fully funded, and then we still might be, because we don't know where our OPC is gonna. And we hope it's under the 5 million. I will not be surprised at all if it's 600 million. Yeah, so I think, that's why I say I'm not personally, not willing to give up on the bike bed grant yet and say that we don't need it. I'm not willing, wouldn't recommend we say we won't go back after another federal grant yet because we don't get VIP. We haven't used all our ability to ask. We have found foundational stuff that we have not gotten into the cost yet. So we just don't know yet.
And the original amount that we had budgeted for this process, this part of the process was 4, and this amendment's 4.8. So it's a difference of 800.
Thank you. That was gonna be one of my next questions.
Yeah.
I guess my next thought is just for oversight of progressive design of 7 to 8 million is gonna be 2.5 million. So you were gonna spend 2.5 million overviewing 7 million. That's 35%.
Correct.
What is that in comparison to most oversights?
I would say it's a little on the high end, but not way out. Being honest,
Like a little, like twice as much?
No,
Because I
I would
usually
say
think of like 10% is about normal for oversight.
for phase 1A, the amount of effort we have to do in the collaboration to get the resolutions of design criteria, the things we're developing in phase 1A, I'm not surprised it's higher because there's gonna be a lot more hands-on back and forth, some keyword developing the framework of the project. I would say going into the next phase 1B, that somewhere in the 8 to 10% range would be phase 1B. Construction will go up a fair amount more than that for the construction oversight. Part of that is we're gonna be doing all of the inspections and testing and all of those things. It depends on how we contract some of that stuff. But I would say, it's still a cost that has to be paid to somebody. So I would say, yes, we're probably a little high. I would not say that we were double by the means. I would say I would expect 20 to 25%.
The other thing to consider right now is that we're probably high because by this time of the job, we should have had our NEPA stuff behind us.
That's part of it. I mean, there's some things we weren't figuring on doing that we shouldn't be doing.
Number two, the whole TIPIA loan process.
The grant administration
Doesn't happen in a normal project like this. That's an extra overhead cost, if you will.
I think some of that's an outside.
That's not going into the oversight.
Project, yeah, because I just had similar question just to for my own frame of reference, like a third of the costs going to project management and admin.
Yeah, I mean,
We are needing to be mindful and pinching pennies, like what's that is often a space that can get fat with. If you really have to be slim, you can be slim.
I guess the thing I would say too is. It's not gonna come across very well. This, that giving yourself a little flexibility so you don't have to waste time creating amendments a bunch of times saves you money. We're only gonna do what you ask us to do. You're gonna see all the invoices. If you see somebody on there that you don't think should be on there, we'll take them off. Or where you don't feel like you're getting a service from one of the elements we're delivering. So I guess we'll figure out a different way to do it. I mean, I
get that, but if you take a look at last year
yes.
and you underran last year by not 2 or 3 or 4%.
We overran by $2 million last year. And the first year we underran by 1.7. So I will not be surprised if we end this year at 3.5. Now, what we do though, is we do have some historical and I did look at that. T, can you bring up the Excel file?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Pull up the third tab. But one of the things now that we have some history that helps us is we can go back and look at how much have we been invoicing every month for the last year. And so I looked at that and said, okay, what have we been invoicing? What was the level of work we were doing? What are we adding? What are we not doing? Where do I think we'll be in relationship to that monthly burn, right? So we were burning, I think, 440 million, yeah, that would be 440,000 a month.
Yep.
Historically. So if you look at, we're not doing all the grant applications and stuff, that probably is a little less than the oversight of the civil and that work. I wouldn't be surprised if we're at the 500 to 550 average for this phase 1A. If you look at our estimate, go back to the first sheet now. Sorry, tell me if you want to digest.
500 would be 4.5 million
Yes,
and versus the 4.8,
yeah.
4.9.
So if you look at where we're at, we run, I think we dropped down below 5 in 1 month because there was not a lot coming in. But we went up a little bit. So I think we averaged around 6, a little above 6, average. I felt like we were probably a little bit high, but I don't think we're crazy high. And it gives us a little flexibility, but you know, can we take 20% off of that? It's an estimate. I mean, I can go through and cut 20% off of everything and I mean, you know, we're only, yeah.
So I appreciate that just because we give you budget authority, you're not spending it.
Right.
You know, that I
Yeah,
appreciate, and we give you a lot of full faith and credit for doing that. And that's why we don't look at, you know, every single line item to the degree that we do. And I know that you haven't used, so you had a scope of work to spend dollars. You didn't spend the dollars, which those tasks still need to be done, and we're pushing them forward to the next step.
Or they've taken, you know, like the travel thing was such an unknown. We had no idea how much level of effort or how long, like
Some of us did.
we assumed a bunch and it didn't happen, so we took that out, and then we make another assumption, and you take that out, and you assume it again. They could all sign the agreements tomorrow and all that budget goes away. I don't know what they're gonna do.
So one thing to keep in the back of our mind as we go forward and this thing matures a little more, it's not necessarily good for you to underrun your funding every year.
Correct. We should.
What that means is we lost the opportunity to use that money elsewhere to accelerate the schedule.
Absolutely.
So the first year, you underran by a couple million. Last year was a couple million. And I understand why that happened because we weren't ready. And you weren't ready, and there's no sense just dumping money down a bucket.
And it was a lot of unknown scope.
Yeah.
A lot of guesses as to how much effort we.
But as we go forward, now that scope is firming up, we got a contractor on board. I personally think it becomes a lot more important that we agree on the scope of work you guys are going to do, what you truly think it's going to cost. And it's just as bad to underrun by 30%, 50% than it is to overrun. Not really, but yeah.
No, you're right, and you've said this before, and I completely agree with it. If you underrun and your scope was right, and your estimate was right to begin with, if you underrun, you either didn't do something that you still need to do, or you didn't do something that you missed, right? And you probably do need to do it. So like, it's still a problem, like there's a range in there, right?
That's
It's an
why,
estimate.
that's what I'm saying though, but you plan to do certain activities and at a certain cost. Those activities still have to be done. They're getting pushed onto this amendment because they didn't get done before. I'm okay with that and I'm probably prefer underrunning than overrunning.
Me too, but not by 50%.
Well, that just means that we're not estimating as close as we can. So I guess my question is this is the final version? What was the number the first time you had staff look at this? How much did it come to?
You want to go back to our estimate before we did the RFP for TV? When they first did this, they were at about 7 million, 6 million. I'm like, there's no way, I can't even come close to justifying that. So we went back and we went through it a couple more times and said, hey, you know, we put the deliverables in, said, what are you doing for these deliverables? Made them sit down month by month. You got this coming in. What are you doing to actually review it? Well, if it's not coming in, then why you got hours? And went through that and got to where we're at. So,
Is this the sharpest pencils that all your subcontractors can give you then? Because what I'm hearing, so I've been asked to sharpen my pencil and we've had to sharpen our pencils. And is everyone here to play with as extraordinarily sharp with
I
pencils?
would say that yes, they feel like it is. You
And
want me to go cut them 15%. We cut them 15%. We just let you know when we run out of budget. Maybe we make it, maybe we don't. 15% is probably within the range of estimating. So if you want to see a number that's lower, I can give you.
I'm just asking though, because you are the owner's rep and you are doing, in my opinion, mean, the meetings I've been in, I've been proud that you're on. So I just want to I want to acknowledge that, and I don't want this to become anything other than us just having a conversation. But I just want to make sure that the consultants that you have on here have been asked to come to our events, right? Like, this is not like okay, because
This is what they intend to do and think they need to do to oversight the project for the next 9 months.
okay. And because you're right, I actually, if you give us 4.8, I personally want all the work that we are, to agree to this, we have to really, we're agreeing to this. And so we're all in this together.
Oh, and I would also say that you now have committees you didn't have before.
Yeah.
Right? So if the engineering committee doesn't feel like you're getting the service that you need, or you need more than you're getting or less, then we should have those committee meeting discussions and say, hey, you all, I believe, will all get to see, I know at least communications and engineering will get to see our invoices and our scope and what we're doing. I think that's the other check, is that you guys need to look at that and say, hey,
It's communication saying,
because they got JLA. Marla should be watching JLA.
oh, that side of it. I was gonna say, I hope it's finance.
Well, yeah, I mean, finance has a part in it too, but I think
I guess
committees.
All of the above, yes.
where I'm coming from on this is, for the most part, we have assumed roles that we're all working on.
Yeah.
And we like to have the information, and we like to ask you to dig up information for us. I think what I would like to know is when we go bring us a rock, you say the rock's gonna cost you $12,000. We are creating an immense amount of extra committees, task force, all these things. And that all has an exceedingly high cost when I'm looking at through this. You created these, it's a 4-hour meeting.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to sharpen the pencils, and I don't want someone flying in from Denver for a 1-hour meeting for one day where they're going to charge me for 2 days of work on that, or 3 days of work. Depends on what that is. And if they're building into their hours to come up here to have a one meeting where it could have been a 15-minute call on Zoom, I want to cut that down, because we are using people's dollars, and sometimes it's great to have people in the room on really important days. But when we're having, subcommittee meetings and flying people in, and people are taking days out of their schedule, to me, that's a make work day. And I can't sign off on things like
I
that.
don't
And
disagree with that 100 at all.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I do think in that spirit, not to repeat the good phrase again, sharpen pencils, but there's an element too here of just our own efficiencies, like bi-weekly meetings that are slated at 2 hours. Like, I think there's room, and I welcome the governance committee, but we can tighten those agendas. We should be really clear about the background that's needed. The expectation is we're all walking in and we have our background and can make decisions. We spend a lot of time still talking through things that should already be homework we can have. And then on the other side of that, we all share in the responsibility, kind of to Jake's point, and back to keeping everyone honest. I don't want your time, the time we're paying for as a agency with no staff, the staff that we then do have through the owner's rep, being pulled in different directions, or your time monopolized by us. Because if all of us are just popping in to say hi and want to sit down and chat for an hour, 12 commissioners, you just lost almost 2 work days of your time or someone else. So I would say also that's a conversation when the full board is here about what is the appropriate interactions that we should all be having. Because it could be that if you're a committee chair, you have access to staff for your committee needs and whatever consultants you're keeping track of. But there's a huge gray area that as we start to move faster, I'm concerned about. Because I have 5 counselors I have to manage at the city. And if I'm not being bad cop, I have staff that would get nothing done in a week. And then we have double that. So that's already a concern to me of just how much time is being spent preparing for meetings. Those are a lot of hours that add up. And I don't know where that's hidden, but more what I'm saying is you have my support, and I think other commissioners' support of so tell us no, or don't talk to us sometimes.
And I would say some of that is that as consultants, and right or wrong, if you ask us to be here, we're going to be here, right? And if we feel like the expectation is to have people here, then we're gonna be here, right? That's, that's what we're here for. So I think one of the things we've done is we don't have people here as much as probably initially we thought we were gonna have, right? There's not a group of 20 people sitting in here, right? We could. If you want to pay for 20 people to sit here, I'll bring 20 people down. But I think we do need to have that flexibility of getting people in here at the right times and unfortunately, and we need to consider this, Kiwa's design staff comes out of Denver. Right? So they can't be here in an hour. They're not sitting in Vancouver. They don't have a design staff in Vancouver. Their design staff is sitting there. We're not paying for this guy, but somebody for Arup is in some other country that I'm not even sure what it is yet, that's gonna be working on the job. I am not paying for him to come over here, right? Kiwa's gonna use some folks from Canada.
Now we could all go there, say it's Italy.
Yeah. The point is, we need to understand that and that we are all over the last 3 or 4 years used to working virtual. I personally would rather have people here. I'd rather have 15 people here in the office. I think it can be a combination. I think we absolutely, it's good to have us at least 3 to 4 days a week. That we're here, like, and have the right people here. So like when James is here and I'm here and Sarah's here and.
Right, but that's your core staff.
Core staff
That's
should
not
be
coming from Denver.
right.
That's
And-
people that live in the area that get to commute down here. We're paying for that. But if it takes a day or 2 days just to get here and then to get back and we're paying 100% where they're not working on the project, we're paying for travel. Why are
There's a
we
whole
doing?
day, I know. And
That,
but
hey,
one of the things is there are times where in initial meetings, there are benefits to have that personal relationship, right? So the guy that came today,
yes.
I do not anticipate him to come here for another meeting with Thomas, right? That was a one time, you guys need to meet,
Yes.
you need to build a relationship. You don't.
And
need to be
hopefully they
there
went out.
maybe once or twice, but I think we gotta manage that. And again, I think if you say it all the time, why the hell did you have 20 people in that meeting? And every time I'm like, okay, can I justify to Jake why I got 20 people in this meeting? No, okay, then how many can I justify to Jake? I have that conversation in my head every time I have people in the meeting because I know I'm gonna get the question of why do you have so many people in the meeting? But you need to ask those questions and we need to be able to answer. And if I can't answer it, then I shouldn't be doing it.
I think the chairs should decide I think if there's ever a question of who should be here and who should be flying, it should be the chair of that committee, honestly. The instance today with the NEPA, I think having that in person with Karen, because Karen also came down 3 hours and 3 hours, but the initial meetings on critical path items need to be sometimes in person because that is extraordinarily important to ensure that the people have that personal connection. Now, online, to be honest, Thomas had no idea who I was until basically today. So now we can go and move it online. I think the issue though for HNTB, and I have noticed this, is it's nice to have the people in the room, but I think we can have more owners reps online because we trust you all. And we know, and we have a relationship with most of your staff. And
So
so,
Amy lives here.
no, I know she does. But I'm saying like,
How often is Carrie flying up and does Carrie need to be here?
I mean, most of the time he only comes up when we feel like it's necessary for him to be here because one, I don't want him up here, he's too expensive. And he has a bunch of other shit he needs to be doing besides just this.
Yeah, now if he's
Is that
sharing the cost
yeah,
with another project.
And he has a lot of
come out
times, he only charges, and some of his time is national time. So like Steve Howell, part of his time is national, it's not. So some of those people that come in are national people that are under our overheads that don't charge. Some of them do. It just depends.
We're still paying. We're still paying for the.
Well, yeah, you are, but ours is, I'll argue about our overhead any day you want to, because ours is way lower than anybody else's.
I have another question. Sorry, I'm just gonna keep asking. For the amount that you're proposing, is the travel budget, what is the travel percentage? Is that in,
That's the expense line. To 5%.
so 5%?
No.
The other direct expenses.
Yeah, it's the other direct expenses. Under
It's
the,
273,000.
can we pull that up?
Yep.
But we do all the direct expenses individually. Now, all of that is not travel. Some of that is like JLA has a lot of expenses for putting on events and stuff, right? So they put their direct expenses for that in that line, but 75% of it is.
So the JLA stuff is not just under the communications, it's also down here below.
And they have their direct expense for their direct.
Our bills to the
Yeah.
HRWSBA.
Because the communications,
Storyboards, when we were doing storyboards, was an individual line item under direct expenses, so that was $150,000.
I was 150.
I don't want any more of those. Oh,
So I guess my next question is communications, 408,000 between now and the end of the year.
and that
And I
is
know
not
that-
all, part of that is government
Government affairs,
affairs, strategic.
but I'm looking at public meetings and everything and I know we're getting some, it seems like some little bit in the aesthetics committee, they're having more meetings than just the four, right? They added one. Didn't the aesthetics committee add another?
Yeah, the aesthetics committee asked for us to have an extra meeting for the aesthetics committee, because the committee wanted one additional time. They asked for an additional meeting.
And that is included in this budget, correct? That additional
Well, that
meeting?
was work that we already did. That was, I mean, there is aesthetics committee work in here to finish it between now and September.
Right.
And then review stuff going after that. But yes,
Alright.
we're assuming whatever meetings we have on the schedule for the aesthetics committee are in. We're assuming. Now, if they add another public meeting or maybe, get back and look. Sometimes we assume one extra one just in case we get one. I said we don't have to zone that for one meeting.
Got it.
So, we,
That'd be
like I
terrible.
said, I try not to get it so close that I gotta nickel and dime and like do something that's not get so.
Okay, well, I guess one of my concerns is that we're gonna spend $408,000 on communications. When I go to our Facebook page, we have 157 likes and 307 followers when we're getting information out.
Well, I would say this is maybe why we need a line item in communications called education, because the communications is not about Facebook. Like, this is not, we're not
It's about-
marketing,
it's
we're
about-
not.
Getting information out.
Correct, and our open rate, as, I don't have it right in front of me, but we reported it out. Very high and much higher, 2,000 subscribers, so. I think also, though, it is the full picture. It's not like you're sitting there and going into this one section and it's. The proof of effectiveness of our communication is not about like the Facebook component in my mind. It's the full picture of like, what are all the different tools that we are using to do the outreach and education as we're expecting it? And that was that updated presentation from 2 meetings back, walking through and making sure the commissioners were saying like, yes, we want this to be supporting the input or informing the public on X. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more saying that that's an odd question in my mind to like laser in on something like Facebook as a data point to indicate like if we're getting what we purchased, like we're not selling a product, we're informing people, which is very different in terms of like some ROI, you know?
And I guess the next question would be is on, that budget that we're spending is $500,000 in the realm of what other projects would be at for communications. Are we doing more than or less than other projects versus something like this?
That is such a hard thing to put in the box.
I think that depends on the complexity of the project.
And I sent Marla a sheet from Florida. They rate projects based on the impact it has, right? So they have level 1 through 5, I think, or 1 through 4. And they look at it as based on how much are we impacting the public? How much are we impacting businesses? How much controversy is on the project? And then they size their outreach based on some parameters that they have. It depends. I mean, you could do none and maybe you get a few people upset. Maybe you get 100 people upset. Maybe you get 1,000 people upset. You just don't know.
Or you get the lawsuit.
Or you get a loss. I mean, there's lots of.
Yeah.
Communications is kind of, and that's why the purpose of 2 weeks ago was to say, is this the level of engagement this project wants to have? Because it is very much, how much does the owner of the project want to communicate the given project, given the environment of the project, right? And some of them you get nobody that ever comes to your public meetings, and some of them you get 300 people. And you guys, there's not a magic number of like, hey, you should do this level when it comes to communications. It is, it's how much do you guys feel like you need to communicate? I mean, I can make arguments either way of like, you get we had 30 or 40 people at the last meeting, right? If you look at the population of Indians or like salmon, it's 2% of the population that came to our public meetings.
And how many of those came to the previous one?
I don't
Quite a,
know. But
quite a few.
you can come up with all kinds of reasons about why you're not getting out to the public or you are getting out to the public. And it really comes down to, do you guys feel like you need to do more or you need to do less? Are people upset and you feel like you need to engage them, or are they not upset because you are engaging them? I mean, you can stop doing it for 6 months and see what happens. And if everybody's all pissed off, then you can try to recover, but.
I guess that's
That's
my
a great
thing, like
place.
honestly, investments in communication are more often than not about damage control and being out front. Because what you can never quantify, though there are definitely like examples of it after the fact, is what you could have done different to prevent the lawsuit or the pushback that stops down a project. And I would say like the biggest place we've built so much sweat equity, and that is true, and we've seen it work as we like build the reputation of our project, is the on the ground support and the lockstep agreement, not just of our like local electeds, but the community. Yeah, they're pissed about tolling, but we're not lying when we say that the community is in and like has been paying this, and we don't have like some outlier public organized group that's out there doing the like no tolls bridge nonsense that happens on other projects or, but you don't know unless you go the other way, and then you're doing damage control, and damage control never works like often. Once you're on defense, you stay on defense. And so, to me, it's kind of like, that's a cost where even if I would say the turnout at the open house in my mind was healthy. Like 30 to 40 people, especially in a small town, is impressive compared to like a lot of the different things that don't net a lot of people. And I don't think that's wasted time or money. Like that's where I would say, if we're going to be that scrutinizing about 9% of where overhead costs are, I would sit here and I bet you we could look at a calendar of all the meetings that are filling your time, that are things we're asking you to do, and we could cut it in half. I'd rather the time being spent when we are like building our reputation of the community on a public project than the time that we're asking all staff to spend on maybe like extraneous conversations or unnecessary like deliberations when we've already tracked a path or like set a policy in place. So I don't like, I mean, I worked with JLA. I know some of these numbers. I say I know all the JLA numbers. That's not reassuring. The sum I was alluding to was like on the HNTB side, we are seeing some new faces pop up on government relations. We still have outside contracts. In the spirit of some of Mike's memo, I, for one, would love to see like more dialed in of like, what is this person doing? Why is their face now here? What's the actual value they're bringing that person X couldn't have already been doing? And understand, like, have a better handle on some of the internal burn rates of like, is that guy spending 10 hours a week on our project, or is he sitting there with 40 and like, we don't need all that?
Well,
I guess for me, the communications ties in the stakeholder and more importantly, the legislative support. For me, the communications need to be directed, and it needs to be directed to getting $150 million.
Well, those are your lobbyists. Yeah.
Well, the lobbyists do one part of it, but
Yeah.
we do a whole nother part of it, and working, getting in front of them and everything else. And that's going to be where your communication, we know, and I think we have a really good reputation in the community for the project so far. The community was mad at the port, for the toll raise, but they understand it and they've adopted to it and they're used to it. And I think that the community just says, you've got 1,983 days, the year I was born, to get this thing done. And that's what you're going to do. And we need to be saying everything we're doing is moving that direction, and that's communications. And then the aesthetics committee, that's going to be expensive, and we need to again add those costs together, and we need to look at all these things because we all sitting around here, we all have ideas about what's important or what the priority needs to be, but whenever Mike brings something up and says, this is what I want you to be able to say, that's $10,000. I mean, we just had a conversation earlier that almost took us 25 minutes on $12,000 of costs. And we didn't get to a conclusion. We're talking about numbers that blow all that away. You're spending more than that every day. And we're just gonna go, okay, we're not gonna dive into it. And I know, Marla, at the last meeting, you said, I don't want to vote on this until I've got all the information from me. I want to see it. Well, in order for them to bring all the information, we have that costs money. And each time, and then we say, and it's really weird in this situation because our owner's rep is acting as staff.
Well, this is, yes, and I think we're growing together, but like, honestly, I think some of the areas where we're rough right now, this is a public agency and this is a private company we brought on board, and no, you guys don't have that agency experience. Like, that are these areas where I think the committees, especially those with like other elected experience, can be helping. There's a lot of room for improvement on streamline. And then my thing about like getting the vouchers to us to sign off, like that shouldn't be bogging down any system in my mind. If it is, we should cut it. And I would say there are things coming in from the private sector that are encumbering, making some things more efficient. Like I don't know about you, I don't want to see that register anymore. That's like every data point of when you've talked on like the buyout. I want what the current up, give me the new news. Give me the thing that's new for the last 2 weeks. And that maybe that's not a lot of time, but a packet that's 60 pages and 20 of them we don't need is wasted time somewhere. And so I think like some of that is back to we're being candid, because I think that's clear and kind, in hopes that we all grow together, but we're having growing pains of realizing like, yes, we have an owner's rep, but we also haven't fairly maybe supported you guys because we don't have staff that's got like government experience, public agency experience. And that's like a tough place we've put you in, with then also commissioners that have a mix of. Well, okay, yes, but I just mean like, I think this element of like a legislative body like us, and now an executive branch that does not have a staff executive, and you're running that, but you're also an HNTB, that's a weird.
No, it's exactly like we are at the county, because we're legislative and executive, and that's what this body has been acting as, is legislative and executive. But rather than having, one person, like a port director, or, an authority director, we've been acting as that, which actually allows us to do it because there's enough of us that we can actually meet, which is nice. That, we can get together and talk, but we've been acting as that body. And at some point, if we had a executive director, that executive director would be the interface.
Yeah.
That would be the executive director would be that gatekeeper of information, bringing what you want, what you need, and then they would be directing here. I mean, Mike's put in this crazy situation because he's got 12 of us all at all, given times and all these different directions going. And we need to start thinking about that. Is it cheaper the way we're doing it now, or would it be far cheaper if we had an executive director acting as, and then you could look at some of this.
Well, I would say in the life of the contract, and I know part of this is about the end date, like I don't want to take off the table now a scenario that as the project matures and we're nearing the end and we're preparing to set up this authority long-term into operation of a new bridge, that we are bringing in an executive director earlier than when a contract ends with HNTB, and we are working through that transition jointly. But yeah, I see that like in the 27, 28 window, and it's like potentially, maybe I'm totally off the mark, but
It only covers one aspect of what we're doing, which is
for sure.
improving the supporting the authority, right? There's a project you have to close out.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with like the activities of an
But
executive director.
But what you're doing here is supporting the authority. That's
Right.
where, to your point,
No, there's lots of
there is
things
this
that could
weird
go on.
space where, exactly, like, if we were separating out even just like the function of the day-to-day administrator that we are all talking to and you interface with, like.
I'm just saying at some point we need to look at that cost benefit, because if we bring somebody on that's our employee, that would then also be able to overview them, interface, act as that intermediary, that would take a lot of potentially our workload off. of us in that oversight capacity of them, which by all rights, technically, we shouldn't be doing. I mean, by all rights, we should have had executive director and a finance person on board at the beginning. And we do, we kind of have Kevin and Debbie, but I think Kevin's not putting in hardly any time into it. Because he's got his own thing. So I think we're gonna have to have that, especially as we move into likely the later stages of 1A, potentially 1B, that we're gonna have to move there. And it's not a 27, 28. I think this is gonna get so big that even if all of us had 40 hours a week that we could spend on it, it's gonna be bigger than what we can overview very quickly, because there's just gonna be so much going on.
Well, I would say from my perspective too, there's a lot of things that I am not doing or knowing less than I would like to be doing related to the project.
Because you're
Because we're
doing
doing, her
Yeah.
and Amy's somewhat, but.
Like, I think starting to see that separation of what you guys see as your authority hours versus project hours gets us like diving deeper in, especially on like one of the bigger sections. So that we can start getting out in front of like,
But
how long-term does that make sense?
that's a really good idea that maybe we should build into this is one of your charge codes or cost codes or tracking codes is authority time.
Because the bi-monthly meetings and all the prep time for that is all authority.
Hmm.
You know, and I would like, that would give us a better handle too on just like,
And committees and agendas and the
Yeah.
minutes and the collection of minutes and the creation of minutes,
Yeah.
printing out of minutes.
by the way, though, do you
Invoices.
do the phantom? How are you guys doing minutes?
Doing this.
Yeah.
for,
All of our meetings.
the committee meetings, we have them all saved on OneNote.
I mean, like, all of our regular meetings.
So regular meetings,
Yeah.
Patty reports those. She does the official reporting.
Are you doing just action minutes or are you doing like full recap minutes?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ones that get put into. the
Yeah,
packet.
yeah.
What do you mean phantom minutes?
Yeah, what
Is that?
Well, you can do, I mean, you can have like another, there's Phantom's one program, but you can always have it signing into any of your Zoom meetings. It'll generate an automatic transcription, and so that if you're still doing like full play-by-play minutes, at least gives you like a head start for the human to look it over.
Yeah,
But then you could switch to just action minutes if we're always recording the Zooms. That's really a whole commissioner decision, but then minutes become super fast because all you need to capture are the timestamps of when you did something.
I would say that's more what Patty does is we get a Zoom transcript, both the audio and.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
And then she produces the minutes you get. That's all.
Okay.
And not taking, and she's taking notes just because the audio doesn't always come through there.
Yeah.
And you can't always, with people talking over each other, understand what's going on. She'll take notes on it and then she gets the transcript and then does the minutes, and what she produces is what you say.
So,
It's we are an hour, 35 minutes.
yeah, I was gonna say, can we get back into this
Yeah.
a little bit? So Mike's brought up some issues that he wants and that, that we need, when we're looking at this, you're used to doing this for owners rep that are really general and really wide. We give you a lot of full faith and credit, but at the same time, we want the performance metrics and we want the deliverables at this date. This is what we expect. And we want, in building that and designing that into it, and how we're gonna get there. Is I think we're going on some of this, if I'm reading it correctly.
And the rest of it is just details by each individual one, but I think you could pull out themes. And Mike and I've already talked about the themes, and that is just paying a little more attention to the activities and the deliverables are specifically only for this period. So we don't want to see stuff that was done last year. We're only talking about this 9-month period. And as much as you can reasonably be specific on what you're providing. It's not just attending meetings. So the self-question would be, if I did not attend the meetings, what's the impact? If you can't explain why you're for the meeting, don't go to the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, you figure every meeting, at $238 an hour or whatever I average this out to be, every 2-hour meeting, you're burning a few $1,000s.
Yep.
And
So as I said earlier to Mike, if they would have started with this schedule, which is from Kiewit, here's everything Kiewit's trying to do in phase 1A. And on the Kiewit oversight piece of the work plan, you ought to be able to describe what are you doing to provide oversight on this work?
and is it $2.5 million?
Right. And then on the other stuff, like what Carrie is doing on funding and finance and tolling and all the associated studies, list those out. Here's what we want to get accomplished by the end of this year. We're cool.
Yeah, I know, like at the county, there's, like if we tried to create a scope and send this to a state agency, they'd be like, no, we need it. If anything, you're spending, you at least have to go through 2 or 3 things amending it because they want such specificity now anymore. But I also understand that, you put your hours here, you've got your contract, everything. It doesn't exactly flow. I was like, oh, 7.3. And I went down here and okay. But we only have $4,872 on stakeholder and legislative support. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Where'd that fall?
Where are you at? That's just Carrie's work under
Financial services.
That's financial services providing that effort. Our strategic communications.
I know that's
So this
different.
is just Carrie's support of if we're producing any information or funding information or getting his input on legislative action.
Got it.
Then that's his time for him to provide support for that.
So in the other part that I would say is you're the owner's rep, you're working for us, and that's great. You're also hiring a bunch of subcontractors to do very specific things. And your subcontractors, you have scopes of work that are, I would hope, more detailed than the scope of work you're giving us, right?
You got scopes of what they're doing that rolls into the scope.
That rolls, but do they have deliverables that are included on each one of those?
The same delivery. So we take this scope or whatever the scope, and then we have it by their hours. So the tasks that they have, we take this scope, we reduce it down, pull the information out of this scope, and that's what we give them as their scope. So they initially give us their level of effort and their scope. We incorporate it into this master document. Then we take that and give it back to them as a supplement to their contract to say, here's the scope and the LOE for your company to deliver for phase 1A. So it's a shrunk down version of this related to the tasks that they're specifically involved in.
So what I would like to see going forward, assuming that we've got kind of agreement, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Every month, I'd like to see on your spreadsheet equivalent, not by person, I don't care about that, but by the subtask. Here's what I plan to spend in hours. Here's what I actually spent in hours. Here's what I plan to spend in dollars, and here's what I spent in dollars.
Hey, can you pull up our
And my
invoice?
percentage of getting to completion of the.
Actual.
Absolutely, and then percent. of
Yeah,
this.
1
Can
second.
you pull?
Yeah.
So.
If
and I
it's a very
actually have it here.
Yeah.
So in our invoice, we have that.
Okay,
So every invoice that we have has contract amount spent to date.
I don't care about the invoice. I do, but I don't. I want to see a report that you provide not only to us, but you, that shows you internally with your staff, here's where I stand against that work plan.
Okay, you're getting it 2 separate ways. You
Yeah.
get that through what Drew's doing and through the management of the project, because we're a part of the project. And then you also get it in the invoice where it shows you what we spent on each sub line item, and then it also shows you by company. What each company
Yeah,
budget is.
I
all
get
that's
that.
in the invoice as well.
I don't want to look
You're
at,
getting it in 2 different.
I'm not going to look at the invoice.
I know, but you're getting it in 2 different ways.
Right,
So
and
those
that's
are the
cool.
folks that are going through the contract are also getting it through the invoice.
You're getting that as a percentage of the contract, but that doesn't tell you the percentage that you are towards deliverable of what that
That is
actually is.
just a report of how we were presenting against our.
So the other piece that he's alluding to on your report where you have, what was your schedule? What do they actually spend? The other piece of it is, what's my progress? Either percent complete of that work, however you want to do it, other than, I don't want to see take actual divided by the total. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, we will be doing that through the project controls, right? And through the WBS that we have developed as part of the PCE.
Right.
That does not get into, like, we don't take every element of this and put that into the schedule.
Right.
If you want to see that, that's a separate schedule and we would have to further break down the schedule that we're doing.
As long as.
Uh-oh, and then we're adding stuff.
No, that's the problem is I don't know if we report,
Hold
present
on.
information.
We roll it up a little farther.
I get it. So as long as you as a manager,
Yeah.
you're fine with how you're managing this. And if you're only looking at a percent complete for total,
Mhm.
and let's say you're percent complete, you're 3 months behind schedule. You know where the problem is and you've got an action plan to fix it. I'm cool.
Okay, I get your point.
It's yours. It's not mine. It's yours.
Yes. Got it.
So what is where are we at right now? Because we have 17 minutes left. Like where
Are we looking
where
for an
where
action
are
we
you,
need
where are you
this to be-
feeling
Or
like
is
this
this
is going?
about
I just
getting
don't know.
revisions?
Yeah, do you want me to revise this and bring it back? Do you want to go with this and we will work on a process going forward in a workflow? We can approve it as is or approve it with notes and say, bring back one with more detail. Whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to do.
I guess you had a bunch of questions you had answered earlier today, and you feel good about that.
I feel good about, yes, but I don't know what the action is going to be from the board, so I don't know.
So,
I'm unaware of what I may have
next-
questions based on the actions. that
right,
are-
the next step is, it is asking to move forward with this amendment and set this and prove it and set a do not exceed amount. Mike has questions that everybody just got today. And, it's hard to read and have the conversation and get there. You start the end of June or the beginning of June?
We are not fully budgeted through June. We shortened our budget anticipating that we would get notice to proceed. We will maybe or maybe not be okay. Now, we have some contingency money that we didn't spend that we can request to be reallocated to cover us. But we may have to repopulate some budgets.
But
So,
that's June. We're still in April. We've got all of May
well,
to,
yeah.
so that
May
we,
and June, the last 2 months, we thought by May 1st, we would have the new contract. We have contingency budget that will carry us through May and June. We do not have to do this, but I will probably have to send you an amendment anyways. That says, here's where I need to reallocate budget that we don't have in the right buckets.
by when?
Because we're not allowed to move money between tasks. I can only move money within a task.
Right, right.
So-
That's normal. But
we
when
would-
when would you be getting to that point?
We'll have to go back and look at the numbers and see when we're.
Well, we've got the next meeting at least. We
Till
don't,
the 13th, yes, we will be fine. It messes others some tracking stuff up, but it's fine.
It does mess up some stuff that you've already started working on. I'll give you my opinion,
Clean enough.
and I was probably very critical about the document. But I think it's more important if during your reviews, you don't see big blocks of numbers that you feel are too high, that you want additional justification for, then I would recommend we accept what we've got. We're on a journey here. And the next version of this, for next year, we start early, there's a procedure. And we adjust it at that time.
well, it's gonna be a whole new journey next year.
Absolutely.
It'll be in December, it won't be
That's
next
right.
year.
Well, it'll probably be November.
January, but yeah.
But you will be something.
But the approach is the same.
And
Yes. So if you don't see anything
So,
substantial.
so I guess the one thing is we have $4 million budgeted. This is $4.8 million. The justification, because, and this is why this conversation is, this is for posterity at some point. This is for when people come in and you remember, this is about damage control. When people are like, you're spending $5 million just on your representative.
Yeah.
How are you spending 5 million on your representative when you're spending, the actual design builder, you're only spending $7 million on? Seems like you're spending too much. And so that's what all this conversation is for, is so that we could say, actually, we did ask the hard questions. He did have the answers. We went into it knowingly that we're setting an upper limit budget so that he can get that they can get the work done. And this isn't just that. It's half of it is overview of the progressive design build, but then we have all the rest of it on top of the money that we're not spending as an actual organization because we don't have our own staff.
Also remember, this is not a DOT project. There's not 50 DOT people that are watching this project. Because I can tell you, if this bridge was a DOT job, you'd have at least 50 DOT people.
Yeah.
So just another reason that your money is spending, we're covering the whole DOT that doesn't exist.
Right, but at the same time, though, we're gonna get a bill for federal highways and everybody else at some
You
point,
don't have
aren't
to
we?
pay federal.
They're not paying anything for any of that?
No, and ODOT hasn't sent us a bill in months.
So
Does that mean, are they going to?
Did they just forget?
Yeah.
We don't have an agreement with them to pay them anything, so
Good.
they can't spend money on anything right now, and they don't really have. They have left oversight as we continue.
I'm going to
forward
not
than they
say
do
anything
now.
I was about to say and move on.
So the one suggestion I'd have as you go forward, think about packaging this thing to explain to somebody from the outside.
Yeah.
Where are you spending the $5 million? And typically you're managing this contractor, but there's other things that have slipped over time, totally outside of your control. That whole NEPA thing is just soaking up hours.
Yes.
One, two, this whole financial tolling
Yep.
study is a big effort. Three, we're chasing funding from federal grants and everything else. That's taking up time with Kerry and others. So I think there's a little picture that you could very easily say, here's a big chunk of money that if everything was equal, we wouldn't be spending it.
Right.
Well, and the whole, I mean, just the administrative of the invoices and the contract review and like all that's DOT stuff that they typically do. That
Yeah,
we
but
don't have.
let me tell you, next year, that number is going to get a lot
I
bigger.
know, and it's gonna get a lot more information.
And the year after that, it's going to double again as far as invoice management.
Yes.
But what's needed though is when I read this, every hour that I read, granted, there could be some streamlining, but I think that's as much on us as it is.
Yeah, totally.
I wanna
That's shared. I'm not saying, it's-
yeah.
yeah, one way.
yes, we have a lot of people meetings, but also we have a lot of meetings. So I think the streamlining is also on us. I can honestly say, yeah, $4.8 million is a lot of money. Like that's a really nice house, right? Like let's be honest, like that is.
That's a new Oak Street.
That's a significant amount of money.
Second.
And I think that the owner's rep has proven to me specifically coming onto this team that they're doing a darn good job. And I think that if there's a way to potentially just not move this through, but whatever you need to take it, but I personally don't need any additional information, because of the fact that it is sort of open book pricing, if you will, from the RFP. Like it looks, we are working together through this, and if we need to make adjustments, we can.
I give you one other observation that I have,
Mhm.
and that, yeah, we've got an awful lot of involvement with HNTB thus far.
Mhm.
That's not bad.
Oh, I think it's been great. Trust me, I appreciated the level of effort from you guys because it just keeps from us having to bring 100 questions to a board meeting to get, it's much more efficient to have you all involved than to not have you involved.
And if you take a look at what we then take out to the community, we're informed. We know what's going on,
Absolutely.
which there's an underlying benefit there that's hard to calculate, but it's there.
But, you know, and I realize though that not everybody has the time to be able to do that, but there is a lot of value in you guys being involved. That you guys get, you know, and then just so you know, you only pay me 40 hours a week, so regardless of how much
It's
I'm
just
here.
you're not paying me squat
Just let you know, you're not paying any
for
overtime.
my 45 hours a week.
You know,
Okay, so where are we with this? We don't want to lose more of the room. We've already.
and I would like to request that we talk about the contract piece that goes with this. Cause there are some
The end date?
contract things, well, the end date's not as, to me, a big deal, we can make it, we can leave it 26 if you want, at some point, we're gonna have to address it, we were just trying to not. To align it with Kiewit's contract that we set up 31, and you'd have to close the contract out at some point, and.
Mhm.
That's usually at least another year after the contract's done, so it doesn't bind you to anything or change the money, it just means we don't have to mess with the contract. But.
So
That's
so get to the
than that.
2 or 3
The
points
two or
that you
three
want.
things that we want to do is, one, we aligned the pricing structure to be the same way we did the Kiewit contract.
Right,
We aligned the travel to be the same way we're doing with the Kiewit contract, so
Right.
we're paying the hotel just background. And the minimum rate we can get is 107 at West Cliff, 124 at the Hampton, or 149 at the Best Western. We have told everybody you can't stay at the Best Western anymore in the summer because they can't afford to give us a lower rate. GSA rate for this area is 107, but to give people a little bit of an option, we went to Hampton and 107 and said you can go up to the 107 at the Hampton or the 124 at the Hampton, but that's it. If you go to Best Western, you gotta pay the difference yourself. We're just aligning ours to align with that. And then the escalation, which doesn't really come into play for this contract because it's not a year. But we put better escalation terms in here, or not better terms, but more clarified terms on how the contract will escalate, which is a maximum 5%, no more than one a year. Same thing we're gonna do to Kiewit going forward, is that they can't just escalate their people at any amount that they want to escalate them out.
Do we tie that to COLA? What is that tied to?
It's basically an average. We can do some ranges there, and that's probably the one piece that you guys can talk about is what is the rate percentage there. There's a number. Tahi, what's ECI stand for?
Employee cost index.
We could tie it to that, which I think was 4.2% plus usually what Sound Transit used to do was that plus 2%, end up being fluctuating, and then you gotta track it.
I would just set it at COLA.
Ways.
And I would also put a ceiling on it.
I don't know if you want to say COLA.
Well, I would cap it and say it
Yeah.
matches COLA up to 4 or 5.
No. We, on all of our stuff, we're maximum of 4, but we do 80% of Seattle COLA up to 4. Otherwise, your costs just go out the window.
Yeah, that's what, I think we're saying the same thing.
So
You don't wanna go
if
higher than.
do that, we can add that in there. That was the one thing we put 5%, just kind of. Tell me what number you want to put in there. I mean, it will affect, like, you know, I mean, if we start getting capped, my company will start pulling people off because they can't afford to
Have
take a
to,
loss on
yeah.
people. So, I mean, it may affect that. I think 4 or 5% is a fair number that we could live with. But, you know, it's just part of the contracting.
So here's something to consider. If we let the rates get too low in the engineering construction field, you will lose people.
Mhm.
And that's the last thing we want now. We don't want to lose good people off this contract.
And I think these are,
Got the QA.
it's reasonable, 4% year over year.
Yeah, I think 4% is a fair number.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Cost of living, it's not promotions, those are internal HNTB decisions. You really want to keep a guy and he's doing great, bump him up. But if they're like maintaining, this is about the operations, right? Like this is about
What
adjusting.
that does is that if you do a 4%, that means no, we won't pay any single person more than a 4%. What I'd like to do is an average to that. Of an average of no more than 4% based on the people that worked on the project the previous year. Because that way, if someone gets a 6%, someone gets a 2%, the better performers can have a little fluctuation, but overall the contract is capped at 4%.
I agree with that.
That way you don't have any big increases, but it gives us the flexibility to give merits.
But it says here that promotions are separate.
If they go above the 4%, we have to come back to you and ask for permission, or somebody gets a promotion. So say he becomes the president tomorrow. Then I have to come back to you and say, hey, because he got a promotion, he's now an engineer 5.
Do you want to still
His rate
pay
is
for
now
that on the
this, it's more
project?
than 4%. Do you want him, or do you want me to go get an engineer 4 that he used to be and keep the salary at the same?
Oh, we
You
would
can
say
well,
go with the, obviously. We would pay him whatever we need to keep them.
So, I mean, yeah, he's wonderful.
No, you just told everybody they'll get promotions.
Well, I'm known to do that.
You know, you're still, it puts an escalation on it. All contracts typically have that. And it also gives you, like I said, out of cycle, but sometimes we do.
It's confused though, because it says promotions do not increase total price of the contract.
Yeah, so you've got the total cap, so you've got the total cap, and then if whatever they do within that, they hit that budget, then they have to come back in. So if you get a promotion, it doesn't automatically bump that up.
Right. But it could run you out of budget earlier if you
Mhm.
were paying somebody. And it also then acknowledges that every year you'll reset the cycle of, here's the baseline budget for this year, right? Because your people will change, your stuff will change. That's kind of a comparison year to year of the people that were active on the project both times. But it gives you that cap, and then it allows for you all to make a decision of, do we want to keep this person? Is it worth it? Or no, we're good with just, because sometimes you don't need, it's great that the person got a promotion. You don't want to kind of keep them from doing that, but they may be more expertise than you need.
Yeah.
Right? We used to do that at Turnpike. Like, I didn't need a superstar. The GCs always want to bring in the superstars, right? Because they're the most money, and then they get a percentage on that. So we would I don't need a 25-year person. I need a 4-year person.
Yeah.
So if he gets a promotion because he's kind of scaled out of the need for the project, this one probably isn't long enough to run into that. But that kind of is what that helps you with, is that you can say, well, I don't really need an engineer 5. Give me an engineer 4. I still want to pay $10 an hour. I don't want to pay $12 an hour.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the 4% cap average, and that allows you guys to give some 2, some 6. Gives you that flexibility. If the average goes over 4, you have to come back to us for it.
And that's close to the industry average for what engineering firms average across companies is about 4% average a year. I used to have no sympathy because I went with the DOT in Florida for 10 years and never got raised for 10 years.
I don't want to hear about
I have a lot of sympathy for raises.
Florida.
Wow, were they?
No merit raises, no cost of living
But,
raises,
like,
absolutely nothing for 10 years.
Outside of management, they were all bargained, weren't they?
No,
Oh, in Florida.
Florida.
That's why you should be unions.
No, it's
Other things.
I didn't listen to eating raises. Because we're not.
Okay, so what is the other thing we need to resolve? So 4% for maximum annual adjustment of
That was.
annual direct labor rate?
The travel was the other one, and then B11, the labor rates, and again, that just sets it that it's what we just talked about, the 12%.
So I guess my one thing with the travel status, and I know we already did this with Kiewit, and it's kind of in hindsight, but especially going with a Vancouver firm, I would support that the travel, reimbursable travel is 100 miles, not 50. Just is such a
Industry standards is also 50%.
That's not the law.
He is 50 federal law.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
50
federal,
miles.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything over 50.
Wimps.
Good thing you're not president.
That's a commute. That's not an overnight.
Anything over 50 miles.
Sorry, I didn't mean to rush that. They're important things, but it's part of the ask is to approve the edits to the contract.
So
We have no say over that.
we're at 4:00. This is a special meeting. We don't have to do this today. We don't need to make a motion today.
No, this was not for the motion. The
Okay.
motion will be next week when we do the
All right,
special
this
meeting
was
on
for the
Thursday.
discussion.
This was just for the discussion.
Another special meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, we don't have another,
Say,
well, unless you want to postpone it till the May 13th meeting, it just messes up our.
Do we need it? Yeah, I mean, I don't
It's
know.
gonna cost money to push it to the May 13th meeting.
Yeah, how much is it gonna cost? Because it's gonna cost us money to all come in here on
I
Thursday.
mean, yeah, like,
So is there a reason why we would not do a motion
Right
today?
now.
You can, you can.
Are we gonna know any more a week from now
I think that's to bring the motion.
or 2 weeks from now?
Not unless you ask me to provide something.
I'm not doing
But if you've got what you need, you could do it now.
Well, I guess the only other thing is we've had this entire conversation. We have other board members who are not present, who haven't had a part of this conversation. We can make the motion, but is it appropriate? And do we feel like this is a good, an overview of this conversation is good to have with our seatmates?
Well, I think if we were having a special meeting, it was because an action needed to be taken. So unless there's something so egregious that came up today that we don't feel comfortable representing, but like we're a voting body of 6. And we have 5 voting members here. So there's that dynamic of like, I agree with you. I'm uncomfortable. I wish there was more that were able to make it today, but at the same time, in the spirit of everything we talked about with efficiency, are we doing the right thing by forestalling this? Like, why did we all just give our time?
We did not invite all of the board members, so it might be appropriate for us. This was a negotiation, though, sorry. This was a-
Calm down.
This was a meeting for the negotiations to determine if you could take an action to a second meeting,
Next
which
Thursday.
would be next Thursday. That's what we
Guys.
decided.
I'm
We
out.
decided to do. Now, the meeting next week was going to be a 15-minute.
With our recommendation coming out of this.
Your recommendation to the rest of the board was going to be a virtual.
at least you're here, so it'll be okay.
Okay.
I forgot.
Okay, I remember what happened.
Yeah.
What we could do is this group could make a recommendation to the full board for adoption of the 4.8 million.
I'm fine with that. I don't know how we landed on this and then we got into a new committee, but
Well, you needed to.
I'm comfortable. I mean, I want this to be purposeful time. I feel like we made headway. There was good feedback and discussion. I feel confident that there's like understanding on both sides of things that are going to shift towards the next one and how we're going into this. So I'm okay. Like, I want to do whatever we need to be doing to keep this moving forward. And if that's a recommendation,
Yeah, that we did this.
and then an action with the larger.
You guys want to have more talking, so.
Well, this was, I mean, we need.
Hey,
I was there Monday. I don't know how
If we're not,
Yeah, how are you?
if we're not, wait,
I have no effing
wait,
idea.
if we're not actually we're gonna have to come back and meet, so if
Just
we,
a
if
virtual.
we
But
do
it'll be a
any
quick.
shifts in anything, then we'd have to probably create more discussion, is that correct?
I'm not planning.
We would just have a conversation at the start of it that based on the recommendation, this is the recommendation from the committee in essence. But these are the changes after the discussions and reviewing it, and that would just be an overview. It wouldn't be substantive, it'd be minor.
So I am currently not planning to make any changes to anything between now and Thursday unless you all tell me to do that.
No, I don't think there's any actions coming out of our discussion today.
I think what we're asking for, yeah,
So,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I agree. I am hearing all this is like, we're gonna see a different approach taken with phase 1B.
Okay.
And while we're in phase 1A, on the reporting side of things, we're gonna be trying to dial in more clarity so everyone is really understanding and connecting dots back to what we signed off on.
Right.
But I don't see like what we've reviewed today is switching in some way.
Okay. I just want-
Because these are the sharpest pencil you've got, and you can confirm, and they're like hands. If there's any way to cut money off, then I want that to
I think
happen,
you're
but if
better-
there's not,
Way to
way.
cut money is to. Let's say that in a really way that was gonna come across wrong.
Cut down meeting.
No, I was gonna say to pay attention to what we're doing and make sure we're not doing things you're not asking us to do, but. That's the way to
No,
cut
that's
down
fair.
the money is if you see something that you're like, why are we? You need to quit doing this meeting. There's no value in it. That's where you're gonna cut money. It's not gonna be in our estimates.
Yeah.
Just an estimate,
Yeah.
right?
That comes back to scope.
Yeah.
What scope do you want to stop?
Or if you hear somebody saying, hey, why don't y'all go do this? Asking, why are you asking them to do this? Cost us
Yeah.
money.
Okay.
But yeah, more of a.
They,
I just wanna share some information that I can
I think
add some value to this discussion. Like Mike said, I was in Sound Transit for many years and did a lot of design build projects. And they are not as extensive as this design build because they are all traditional design build. And they were not the bridges, they were garages and the extension of the guideways and then stations, which is a lot less complicated this. But we always use about 15% of the budget against the construction cost. It's kind of their kind of benchmark for any design build project, such as I had to execute a design build management contract we're called DBPM, and many of those were HNTV contracts. And I just want to give this information as a sidebar reference, how much
So it's
they should spend.
15% of the design of design or construction.
Construction cost.
What about on design?
Well, there is no design because it's a design builder
It's a bid,
doing
but yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And they started with some bridge document they have some sort of a base design to start. So they didn't have to start from the progress design build and there is no such a thing like grant administration in their DBPM contract. And actually, Sound Transit has a construction manager and project manager as their staff as a counterpart of DBPM's PM as well as the design builders PM. So I think 15% is a kind of the benchmark we can gauge how much we should spend.
Thank you, Tim.
I will say, the only thing that we will do is going through a tech edit, so there will be some, like, just cleaning up of the tech stuff, but no substantial changes of any of the wording or anything like that. It's just format and function that they're gonna look at. It's everywhere.
It's just you and I here, so
I was gonna say, we can't
can't do anything.
make a motion or anything.
Nope.
So,
Adjourn.
Just walk out, so. And I can adjourn it, that's about the only thing
Uh-huh.
I can do.
That is.
Like,
Well, even then, if it comes back to that's only three of us,
and
that's still three of us.
Did Catherine leave or is she?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still only three of us. So
Well, that's okay.
might as well.
So we'll bring this back to a special session on. Thursday.
On next Thursday, it might be a little more than 15 minutes date based on,
30 minutes.
yeah,
You want more than that?
no, 30 should be fine.
That Thursday at 10 in the morning, right?
Yes. Do we have that on the calendar already?
I believe so.
Yeah, I've got it on mine, it's not from you guys though.
Okay.
Ready to stop recording?
Guys, thank you.
Yeah.
We will package that, get it out to you.